Hey, hey,
How are you doing?
good evening. I'm well, I'm
Good,
well.
good evening. Wow. I have seen your profile. Okay, first a formal introduction. We have with us Prasenjeet Yadav or Prasen Yadav as he's on Instagram. He is a molecular biologist turned photographer who does a lot of cover shots for Nat Geo, has some brand integrations with Samsung Galaxy S21 and a bunch of other things, but mostly he's in the jungle. In fact, the last we spoke on Friday, he was like, I'm going out of reach for a few days. I'll see you on Monday. Don't try and get in touch with me. And that is spectacular. So, Prasenjeet, hi and welcome to Coffee with Creators. Wow, where have you come from? How have I never heard of you before?
First of all, thanks for having me here. I mean, I came across your profile and I saw some of your interviews, and I've noticed that you usually interact with celebrities and celebrity comedians. So I'm definitely a misfit, but I'm glad
Well,
you invited me.
see, that's the thing. You're not a misfit. The point is because the show started, and um, obviously I'm not paying anyone, everyone's a guest. So I started with the people that I know, and the people who I know would reply to my texts in their DMs. So, or I have their phone number. So that's how I started off with. Yeah, I mean, I have no fixed criteria on
Sure.
who I'm going to interview. In fact, I might be interviewing a female motorcyclist racer. Next up on Wednesday is Cyrus Brocha, but yeah, that falls under the category.
That's
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, welcome to the show, and you are a celebrity now.
So yeah, I mean, you have never heard of me, and I would say that's by design. A lot of work I
Interesting.
do is behind the camera, and
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, I started out as a biologist. I studied science, and then I moved into storytelling. And for last couple of years, I've mostly been taking photos for National Geographic and essentially representing India, telling stories from India as an Indian, so that it's not completely whitewashed, if that's the right way to say it. But trying to tell our stories in our own words, in our own emotions, to the larger world, to the wormhole of National Geographic. That's what I do.
And what does a molecular biologist do? I mean, it sounds extremely cool, but my limited knowledge of science is limited to not knowing what it is.
So I started out. Uh, I'll take you back to your first question, where I'm coming from, and this is
Right.
going to be a little longer monologue because I'll give you a pretext for all of this. I'm coming back from my father's farm. This is their house in city, and because of pandemic, I'm staying with them, which is in
Okay.
Nagpur. But they have a
Okay.
farm which is an hour and a half hours drive from here, which is in middle of a jungle. That's where I
Right.
grew up. Like
Right.
day before yesterday when I was there, we heard a leopard, and we still have tigers coming in our lawn. So
Wow.
that's the place where I grew up, which is literally in the jungle. People go into tiger reserves and people go into national parks to see wildlife. As a kid, I used to just step out of my house, and that kind of is what I do even today. That I've been completely completely engrossed into natural history, wildlife, and understanding nature and its patterns.
Right.
Fast forward, had to come to city in Nagpur, did some schooling more and more, and then happened to go to Bangalore. Started like never thought I would pass 10th grade. Found myself in one of the most prestigious research institutes in India, starting doing PhD on molecular biology. So molecular biology is essentially study of building blocks of human body. So I used to study DNA. So I studied
Okay.
DNA for the longest time. And then eventually I was like, hey, I don't want to spend my entire life just sitting in lab and study DNA. Can I study wildlife DNA? And there was this one lab in India, which is in South India in Bangalore, where Dr. Uma Ramakrishnan used to study tigers and their through their DNA. So I was
Wow.
like, that's the place I want to go. And I have no clue how. Writing emails, I showed up there, passed some exams, managed to get into her lab, and I spent four and a half years actually doing sciencey things like being as a scientist. I used to study tigers. I used to walk around in jungle, And people used to think here in Nagpur that I'm doing some crazy, Dr. Salunki stuff from CID. But I used to love to be in jungles. So I used to walk around in jungles across India and collect tiger poop. Because
Okay.
tiger poop is one of the best non-invasive sources of collecting DNA of tiger. Like you can't just go and catch a tiger and take a blood sample from it. So we used to collect tiger poop and used to extract DNA from it and understand tiger behavior, tiger movement across central India, South India. How do tigers move? Are there any tiger reserves which are completely isolated? And all this through DNA. So that's how I started. I worked for a couple of years. Sorry, I went on and on, but go ahead.
No, that's good, but I have one very stupid question. How do you identify tiger poop from other poop? Like, how do you know it's
Oh,
not
that's a
cow
very good
poop?
question. No, that's a very good question. First of all, tiger poop is humongous. It has hairs in it. It
Right.
smells different,
Okay.
and it's associated with tiger pug marks around it usually.
Right.
And the trickiest thing is to differentiate with a leopard poop and a tiger poop. I bet you when you thought you'll speak to me, you didn't think about speaking about
We were
tiger and
talking
leopard
about
poop.
shit.
But
No,
here
no.
it is. We are talking about shit. So tiger poop and leopard poop is very different. I mean, it's identical, but it's usually the size and the amount that helps you identify tiger and differentiate tiger and
So
leopard
who
poop.
poops more? Tiger or
Tiger, of course, because it's bigger.
right,
It's double the size of a leopard,
right,
and it consumes bigger prey. It goes for a gore or a sambar. I don't know how much you know about wildlife, but people listening here might know.
right.
And if not, Google is on your fingertips. Just Google.
Yeah,
This
I
is your
mean,
own wildlife in your own country, so it's easy to differentiate. I mean, identify tiger poop, but yeah, I played with poop and DNA in this really sophisticated lab for like 4 years, 5 years. But there was a bug of photography in me, so I used to be in the lab in this AC room entire day. And evenings, I spent a couple of years trying to save money and bought my first camera. I used to go around in garden taking photos of of critters and insects and use different lighting and created stories. Published my first story for Nat Geo Traveler India edition back in 2013. Decided to quit academics. I was like, I don't want to become a doctor sitting in some lab. I don't think I'm made for that. I'm not cut out for that. I grew up in jungle. I belong in jungle. So
right.
how can I make myself useful to scientists using photography and storytelling? So I moved into storytelling back in 2013. I think I got really lucky at different stages in my career. The month I decided to take a sabbatical, step out, and everyone was mad at me, including my PI. And she was like, "What are you gonna do? Wedding photography?" And I'm like, "I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm definitely not doing this." She's awesome. She's my closest collaborator now. But BBC reached out to me to work on their their prime blue chip documentary called as Wonders of Monsoon. And they reached out to me as a scientist and they were like, hey, you're a researcher and we know you had worked on this or you had pitched this story. Do you want to work with us for 6 months? I was like, whoa, just
Yeah.
quit academics, my first gig with BBC, where people reach after 20 years. Sure, I would love to do that. And I spent like 6, 8 months working with Indian filmmaker and BBC's blue chip documentary crew as a researcher. And we filmed in Maharashtra and South India and different places. And by the end of it, I realized this is not what I want to do. I don't want to tell stories for I don't want to be a hired gun which goes and films whatever my director sitting in DC is, or in Bristol is telling me. I want to tell our stories in our own way. It shouldn't
Okay.
be their perspective of my country, them telling to the world.
Wow.
And
Okay.
when that is how it is, the content is always about, and for the years, Indian naturalist or India is all about temples, tigers, Taj Mahal, and snake charmers. But we know India so much more than that.
Yes.
So I was like, how am I going to do this? And I think that's that, early 20s arrogance that you have. And I was like, I'll figure it out. I'm not going to work with BBC. And I happened to work with different researchers. I had some body of work. By that time, I had published in different magazines in India. I got my first check of 100 and 100 12 rupees for publishing my first story. And I was like, whoa, this is definitely not going to help me make a living from storytelling using photography. I still have that check. I never encashed it. I would have needed more fuel to go to the bank for that. But that's when I started looking for international avenues. I got to know about National Geographic. One of my producers in BBC had recommended my name. They asked me what I want to do. I pitched this really small story about how mountains play a role in evolution of different species, how different species of frogs and lizards and snakes evolve and how they are found in India. And they loved it. They gave me a small amount of money. And yeah, that was 7 years ago. I had my first story on snow leopards in Nat Geo 2020 year magazine. So it's been a long journey.
Yeah, snow leopards happened right now in 2020 is what you're saying. How was that? I mean, generally people, like in fact, that's one of the first conversations we had on the DM was, I was like, how do you have so many pictures of snow leopards considering they are so hard to find and people make multiple trips to spot one and be like, oh, I spotted one on the mountain and you have close-up
Yeah.
shots of them.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So in between that first project that I did for National Geographic and to Snow Leopard, I did a bunch of others. They sent me to Mexico to photograph these carnivorous bats in this abandoned Mayan ruin in the middle of a jungle. Crazy story.
Carnivorous
You should
bats,
carnivorous bats like vampires. So
right?
it's bat species called as Vampirium spectrum, and
Okay.
that's probably the particular species because of which all the vampire myths around the world have evolved. So that was
What
a
do they
story that
feast
I worked
on?
with multiple photographers. They feed on they are false vampires. They don't feed on our blood. They feed on
Okay.
small mammals and small reptiles, and they feed on that. But they look so vampire-like. So and
Yeah.
they are big. They are like I can't show here. They are like this big. So
Wow.
they're humongous. So anyway, that happened, and at some point when I quit working on tigers after my research, I was like, I'm going to make a career out of telling stories about non-charismatic species. There are some species which are like stars, right? I was like, I wouldn't work with the big stars of wildlife kingdom. I would work with good actors of wildlife kingdom, right? So I picked these
The Nawazuddin
reptiles.
Siddiquis of our
I was like,
wildlife.
yeah, I was like, I'll work with Nawazuddin Siddiquis and Rajkumar Raos. And those were these crazy looking small frogs and lizards and drap looking birds and reptiles. No, no one would know usually about because they are not, they are usually masked under the larger umbrella of tigers and elephants and leopards and rhinos and all the megafauna that we have in India. So I was like, I'll pick Rajkumar Raos and Nawazuddin, and they gave me a break. And Snow Leopard happened to be my Bombay Velvet, which won't happen, to be very honest. So at some point, Geographic, one of my editors, and she got to know I have a friend who works closely on Snow Leopards, and I was going to go there, and she was like, hey, you know what? The last time National Geographic did a story on snow leopard was 15 years ago, and that's the only good story of snow leopard because that's the only time we got some decent pictures. So you're going into Himalayas. Why don't you go shoot snow leopards for me? That's all the conversation was between me and my editor. And she has been editor of wildlife for National Geographic for 38 years. So
Wow.
all the gods of National Geographic, she probably hired them at some point. And she's probably the hardest person to impress in this world by showing wildlife photos. So yeah, I mean, it started with that. And I just decided to move there. So I drove from Bangalore. I was like, I'm not going to do this. Like they wrote to me asking, how many trips are you going to make over the next how much time? I'm like, I'm not making trips. Like this is the biggest opportunity or the responsibility that I've ever gotten in my life. Like the most influential magazine in the world is asking me to tell a story about the most elusive and charismatic big cat of the world. I'm moving there. So I drove from Bangalore and I moved to this small village in high up Spiti Valley. And I lived there for 2.5 years. I used to come down
Wow.
every few weeks, every few months, but I just literally moved there and I started working, living with the locals, understanding how these species move, where to find them, how to find them, how often do they move. work closely with scientists, those who have been studying these snow leopards for 3 decades now. So borrow all the information, and I was a vessel here. I was a vessel to tell a story about snow leopard and these scientists to the world. But of
Right.
course, it has to. I mean, I have to be solid to hold such a strong story. So I started using different techniques. I knew seeing a snow leopard is not that difficult, but it's not probably the best photograph. So I started developing, and I mean, I didn't develop it, but there are these camera traps which are developed by some of my previous senior photographers. I modified it to make sure that it runs in minus 40 degrees at 5,000 meters for weeks altogether, and started deploying those. So for the people, those who don't know what camera trap is, it is essentially a studio that you set up in the middle of anywhere, where the animal comes, triggers the infrared beam, and takes his or her own photograph. So I get to decide how the entire photo is. They get to decide when it gets clicked. So I started setting up those sophisticated camera traps into the mountains and started getting a deeper look into the lives of snow leopards. And yeah, that's been my last 2.5 years of obsession, which came out as a magazine story, a podcast, and web story, and it got published in different National Geographic platforms. And you can see some of those photos on if you Google snow leopard Prasen, something like that. Yeah.
I'm gonna do that, but I have a question. A story like it was so open-ended, right? Your publisher said that just I need a story about snow leopards, and you were like, okay, I'm gonna move to Spiti and spot them and learn about them there. But I'm sure in the beginning few months itself, you must have gotten yourself some shots of the snow leopard, which maybe you weren't happy with, and maybe you wanted to improvise better and better. But with stories like this, when do you know that, okay, I have gotten a story and I'm going to stop? How do you know that something might take 2 years, something might take 1 year, something might take a few weeks, and something might just go on forever? So, where do you draw the line that, okay, this story is now ready to be told?
That's a great question, and I'm glad that you understand about storytelling so deeply to specifically ask this question. Uh, so here's the thing. I'll break this in 2 or 3 compartments. It's difficult to answer it in one. So what is my process of understanding what a story is? If I get told that go photograph snow leopards. And a lot of it is essentially a lot of background research. I spent weeks and months reading about whatever has been published about it in the past. So that's when my research background just comes active, and I'm like, I'll find all these obscure journals where scientists might have published something about snow leopards that is not out there in public domain or in article format. And I read about that. That helps me identify some of those newer things which hasn't been documented, hasn't been written or published about. And then I use that as a precursor when I go to the field. And usually in these long non-ended stories, it's very easy to get completely disillusioned. You get completely trapped into this bhul bhulaiya where you don't know where the head is, where the tail is. You are documenting everything, and that's the reason why small breaks are necessary. So my usually a good story, even if it is 20 weeks or a year or 2 years, it usually is in 4 different stages. First stage is when I go there and I act as if I know nothing, which actually is true to some extent. And I learn from people. I walk, I understand, I get a sense of landscape, and I photograph everything. I might come back with like 40,000 images after my first trip, and with a very minimal small camera. And then when you come back, you take some break, you look at those images, and you realize with with what has been published, what has been published and what has not been published, what are the key parts of this story which are these pictures which might be interesting to take to the next stage. And then in the next stage, next trip, I document a bit more. It's in the third trip when I get to know that these are probably 20-25 pictures that might be very important, which I might bring to my editor. By that time, I have not even brought anything to her because she doesn't know I'm the man on the field, so I get to shape the story. They get to tell me that, hey, you know what we're saying? It doesn't matter if you spend 35 days sitting in a height to take this picture, that picture is terrible. Because I'm biased towards that one picture because I've spent 2 weeks
That much
sitting
effort.
in minus 40. It's my effort creates a bias towards what I create. But an editor does not have that effort bias. They just have the right direction. So they
Lens.
guide exactly. So they help you guide. And then the fourth and the fifth trip, now that you know that these are the 20 pictures, then the fourth and the fifth stage is essentially try and recreate those images, different iterations of it in hundreds and thousands of times. And by that time, either your editor is extremely annoyed with you, or your budget has run out, or your time has run out, or the schedule has run out, and then you get published. But there is no decided end to this because you want to take photograph till that 11th hour 59 second because you know you can get a better picture than what you have.
Wow.
So once the
And
story comes out, you're always like I've figured out initially a few stories when came out. I was like I was really sad for weeks and I was like it didn't come out well. Now I've accepted. If I spent 2.5 years working on a project, there's no way that the final product that comes out, which is a snapshot of what I've experienced, I would feel happy about it. So just live with it. Publish, done, move on to the next thing.
right. And someone's asking how do you recreate those images because basically sometimes it may not happen. That's Chipiwara asking
Yeah,
because you said that from phase three to phase four would be you trying to recreate some of the best images that you
yeah,
had in phase three, right?
yeah. That's true. That's true. And that's the reason why when the final by the way, the final story that gets published could have anywhere between 5 to 12 images. That's it. You
Right.
work and you shoot maybe 100,000 or 150,000 images. Out of it, in the final story, there might be just 5 or 12 pictures that gets published. What happens is, out of those 12 pictures, there might be 3 or 4 pictures which are just incidental. That I was driving somewhere and I saw this wonderful light and an animal walking across a river, and I stop and I click and I
Mm-hmm.
move on. And there might be a picture for which I have spent 6 months setting up traps, monitoring it every week in this really obscure place on a ledge on the mountain where you know that a snow leopard will pass and you want to get a picture of snow leopard walking towards your camera trap, but you also want the picture in the night so that the light in the three villages in the background is visible so you can tell a story about humans and snow leopards are sharing spaces for thousands of years. That image you keep working on, you keep trying to get the better one, and that's what you do.
Wow. That's so much thought going into a few pictures but okay, I don't know. I mean, okay, someone very simple question. What camera do you prefer to use? Like
I
I'll start
started
with
with Nikon, and I had that basic D60 1855 types. Now I have like, and I'm not bragging, this has happened over the years of me just shelling all my savings into buying cameras. I have 1 or 2 vehicles full of different brand cameras, and now it's no longer about what camera body I use. It's about what accessories that I attach that camera body to. Does it sit into a camera trap contraption? Does it sit into a remote trigger contraption? Does it sit into underwater housing? Does it sit into what does that camera sits into? So I use
right.
all sorts of brands. I've used Nikon. I've used very little Canon. I have Sony. I have many of my video traps right now, which essentially takes videos of animals. They are all Sony. I use Panasonic for videos, so it's mixed of all of these.
And how often do you land up damaging these cameras and accessories, considering you leave them for weeks unattended at times, and it's nature, nothing's predictable, and there's a limit to technology and how much it can withstand. So,
Yeah, I have lost a few cameras, few lenses over the years, and initially it used to bite a lot. It still bites a lot now, but then you move on immediately because you have a spare one. In those days,
right.
once you in my early career days, losing a camera or tripping it or dropping it into water used to be like I used to skip a heartbeat.
Huh.
Now, like I still skip a heartbeat, but I immediately move on to the next camera because there's limited time.
Very limited time. And how has technology changed from, like you said, 2013 was your first Nat Geo
Nah,
um,
my first story was
assignment?
back in 2015. I got my first assignment in 2014, which got
Mm-hmm.
published in 2015, uh, which was a grant come assignment. But technology, of course, I mean, see, natural history photography, wildlife natural history is very much technology driven
Mm-hmm.
after a point.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing as specialized work as or some of my colleagues are doing, that's when it is all about what accessories and what gadgets that you use. But to
Mm-hmm.
reach here, you can reach here with one camera body. uh, and because I was told when I was starting out, I had no money, I had no bank balance. My parents were like, "Hey, you're onto something that we don't know about. We don't want a penny from you. We don't expect a penny from you." That's a big privilege I had. That I was at zero,
Yep.
so I started at zero, which was a big privilege, and I managed to get my first camera and then move on. But honestly, I it started with one basic camera body, and some of those images I still remember 5 years 4 years later when I was sitting with a really one of the biggest editors in the world for natural history. I showed her one of those earlier pictures also. So you you can make it without great equipment, but once you're there and once you are expected to deliver that quality work, that's when it's a lot about equipment. Along
Right.
with, of course, everyone is working hard at a particular level. Like there are less than 100 photographers or 120 photographers globally, those who constantly work with Nat Geo magazine, out of which there
Right.
are less than 20 in the world those who do only natural history. So
Wow.
at that stage, everyone is working 10 times harder than I am, or everyone else is. So hard work is given, access is given. Everyone needs to have that crazy access and have those skill sets of being street smart, knowing people, having your reputation that people believe or trust in you. They know that you're not some crook who's gonna screw them over eventually. But along with that, you also need technology, which is about newer ways of getting insight into wildlife's life without disturbing them. And
Hmm.
that's a lot of technology. Uh, I was sitting looking at my mobile phone, my camera somewhere far away. Essentially, I was taking photos and videos 120 meters away, and my gimbal was moving and taking photos of that subject there. This was day
Wow.
before yesterday. So we can do that today. It wasn't there like 10 years ago.
Nice. Wow. And there is a question from Karthik talking about, could you share more on how to write proposals for grants? He's looking for applying to one of the WWF grants this year to do a study on vultures.
Wow.
Hmm. Hmm.
You definitely didn't expect any of these questions and any of this conversation today, I'm sure.
I
But
love
uh,
it.
but writing grants, I mean, in today's content creation, if you are going into editorial or
Wait, I'm just
documentary
gonna stop you
storytelling,
1 second because I don't understand grants. I don't know what grants are. I just read
I'm
the
coming to it.
question out.
I'm coming to it.
Yeah,
So for the
go for
people
it.
those who have no clue, like when you're doing documentary or editorial work, in commercial
Mm-hmm.
work, you get commission. You
Right,
assist senior photographers, and at some point you're like, I'm ready. And everyone else would definitely feel you're not, but you feel you're ready, and you
right,
jump and you branch out and you start getting commission
right.
commercial projects. In documentary storytelling, it's different because you're not
Okay,
taking money out of it. You're not selling it to someone. So getting money, there's no Samsung going to come and pay me to do a project where I don't even mention Samsung anywhere, right?
mm-hmm.
So in those kind of projects, you get international national funding, which is to do this non-commercial work, which could be
Mm-hmm.
editorial, which could be educational, and those are grants, which could vary anywhere between $5,000, and there are grants which are as big as $100,000, which you can get for a year to do a particular project. And there's a method, and there is style, and there's a way to write those grants. I think that is what I built my career on. because
Right.
I was nobody. Nobody knew who I was. Coming out of this obscure small village, then to a city, then to Bangalore, and I was aiming for something as big as National Geographic. I was like, someday I want to tell stories for BBC National Geographic. I started with that. I'm one of those very few people who started a career with National Geographic. Never happens. 25 years, 10 years, 15 years, and then you reach to the doors of Geographic. But I built my career on writing grants. And what you do is you identify what story you want to tell, you write about it, you explain why the story has to be told, why international audience should take interest into this, although this is
Hmm.
happening in this small obscure little village in some part in South India, but why should someone sitting in New York, DC, Mumbai, or Delhi should care about this? So you
Mm-hmm.
find that vision of finding, making this story globally relevant, then you write about it, then you explain why this has to be told now. That could be a great story, but why now? Now is the best time to it. And then the
Hmm.
third part is why I'm the best person to tell the story. So you don't brag. You are like, you show, okay, I have limitations, but at the same time I have these strategies how I'm gonna overcome those limitations, and I'm gonna tell whatever. So you build those grants and you get funding, which helps you. Like, I never imagined that someone is going to give me $30,000 or $15,000 or $10,000 early on in my career to be like, "Ja Simran ji le apni zindagi." Take photos and share what you want to share, right? It's a great thing when you're starting out. So yeah, hope that answers the grants question.
And someone's asking, which was your largest funding that you've gotten from where? And I will add to that question as to what story was it about?
So that's a tricky question. I would choose not to disclose all the numbers essentially, but
Yeah, yeah, that's
but yeah,
fine.
there have been hundreds of thousands of dollars, honestly, and they come from multiple sources. Even within National Geographic, there are different departments, so different departments pitches in, and of course, those fundings are not usual currently
Right.
in this global storytelling uh, photography scenario. Those are unusual amount of fundings, but they do come across to some stories. Yeah, and I
Right.
still
And
think I have not maxed out. I have my
right.
colleagues sitting in the US who I look up to, but at the same time, I always like, I do stories in 10% budget of what you get, and they get
Right.
millions of dollars, which is
Right.
amazing. So there is
Right.
money, but not for everyone. You have to first you know tell
Mm-hmm.
that you're not gonna lose that millions of dollars. You're gonna deliver out of it, right? So you have to build a reputation.
And Soham's asking, when you share strategies and grants, isn't there fear that they'll take your perspective and do it on their own? Oof.
But see, there is always a risk, but
Yeah.
depends who you are sharing with. Usually, grants agencies don't scoop you
Right.
because they have their own legal team, which tells you, hey,
Reputation
you know
and
what,
all.
this is shady, right? So the grant agencies won't screw you. What they'll tell you is that, hey, we can't give you this grant because we already have someone else who's doing this. This project
Right.
has already been done, so you are late or something like that. Or they can tell
Right.
you outright that you're not going to get this grant this year. In other words, that your project is shit.
Interesting. And nature is a very brute force to deal with. And when you're living in nature for a long period of time, the way you do for each story, you're subjecting yourself to nature's mercy. Besides being non-intrusive to the wildlife and the flora and fauna, you're also putting your life at risk in some way or some capacity over there. So, how do you get over that fear of saying not becoming prey to a predator or not get succumbing to some deadly poison out there? I mean, I'm sounding like a noob, but how do you know what's safe, what's unsafe, where to draw the line? And have you ever been in danger, and what's the most dangerous memory that you have? That's a lot of questions. Go.
Common sense and experience.
Okay.
That's my answer.
That's
You don't
and
do
and
something stupid.
Right,
When you go to a new place, you follow. You don't act like a phantom or Batman there. You follow the cues of the people, those who know that landscape, those who know that species. You learn from
right,
them. You don't act like a brat there, right?
right.
You learn from them, and then you learn techniques and you learn ways, and then you take your experiences from your previous projects in different places. I grew up in
Mm-hmm.
jungle. uh,
Right,
and that doesn't mean I'm not scared.
right.
That means that I know how to deal with it a little bit probably. I have been charged by elephants, and I've been rolled on by tigers, and I've seen king cobras really close. But those are not things that scare me. What scares is a mosquito. I think a mosquito scares me the most, because imagine you are in
Okay.
some obscure, far away, remote area trying to tell a story, and you get down with malaria there. Imagine you have walked or trekked there for 3 days or 10 days to get to that place, or have been on some other way, and you fall down sick there because of mosquitoes. I think that is what my nightmare is. It's not the tiger, elephant, or bigger things. And you use your common sense. You take a call how desperate you want to be. You take a call where you want to draw a line in given situation. And I'm not saying that I'm proud of myself that I have not done those desperate things. I
Mm-hmm.
have, and I have broken myself time and again. So, uh, but it's very personal,
Right.
and it's very individual focus. At the same time, it's what you do in that given moment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really badly want to jump from one cliff to another, I uh, yeah, I mean later on you might regret, or you might be like I was stupid or whatever, but you do it at that point, and you keep your fingers crossed that you reach to the other end.
Wow, this is like literal living on the edge. Prasid, if someone wants to start off, you said you were raised around the jungle, you went to it, but say a city dweller like me, privileged as hell, is saying like, maybe I was when I was 17, 18 or 20, at that point of time, maybe I went like, hey, I want to become a nature photographer, I want to become a wildlife photographer. If there are people like me out there, is it possible for them, and how do they start? How do they go about? Because no one's going to give you a grant just to start with. You'll have to do some stuff on your own. So how would you go about that?
Absolutely, and I think the beauty of privilege is it works when you acknowledge it, like you just did. You acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
You know you have privilege. Now you figure out how you can use it.
Mm-hmm.
The privilege is probably having full internet, or privilege is having access to libraries, or privilege having being in a metropolitan city where you can go and meet the biggest scientist of that particular species or that landscape, or that or or come and meet me, or my some of my other colleagues wildlife photographers, and get inputs. So uh, so I don't think anyone looks at a person and be like, she or he is privileged, so I'm not going to help them. I think it's always about how you ask. If someone asks you genuinely, I am I'm the result of that. I've asked genuinely and honestly to so many people, and so many people have helped me over the years. And you take some of those people out, and I wouldn't be speaking to you right now here. So go out there. Of course, you can do it. You have information on fingertips right now. You can read about it, learn about. You don't have to go to a tiger reserve to take photos of wildlife. That butterfly in your garden, and those parakeets flying on your terrace, and that ant in your kitchen
Mm-hmm.
is wildlife. It is as wild as any other wild animal. They are not domesticated. They are learned to live with us. So try and learn how they learn to live with us. You can find stories everywhere. So go out there and learn from your surroundings. Start getting aware. Take photos, of course. You can be a photographer, you can be a writer, you can be a dancer trying to influence and understand natural history and wildlife. You can be anything. You could be a lawyer, you could be a chef, you could be anything. But be aware of our surroundings. I think that is what we lose out on when we get into this really fast world. And I've gone through that phase. When I was a researcher, I was like, I'm not I'm not, I don't have enough time to keep all my senses active to grasp what is happening in my surroundings. And
Mm-hmm.
if you can do that, you'll find yourself finding your own or making your own way into this field.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Wow.
that does that answer your question?
It does. It does in a way because I mean, privilege acknowledged is a lot of doorways opening by itself to start with,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you
yeah,
can use
yeah.
all of that to your advantage, and you should ideally.
Everyone should. We need more and more people doing this. Today
Right.
we are living in a pandemic which is caused because of our bad relationship with nature. Let's be
Right.
honest about it. So
Right.
we need more people into this field, and I'm speaking probably to audiences which are different because those who follow me are already converted. They are already wildlifers or naturalist environment enthusiasts. So I'm probably speaking to audiences different than what I have to you. So we need more
Yes.
people, and you all are welcome.
And how has this pandemic affected your field? Or, I mean, you're already facing a hell lot of danger in a different way altogether. And then now add to that something like, oh, you have to wear masks and you have to be careful who you meet, who you talk to. So, has it really affected your world? Or it's like, hey, I'm in a jungle, there is no COVID here, and things are all right.
No, it has, and both in positive and negative way. So
Okay.
to start with, I can't think when you ask me any questions, I can't think about the answers only at India or Nagpur level. I think about them globally. So how has COVID affected storytelling, naturalistic environment globally? The positive
Mm-hmm.
side is now it's not easy for every Western filmmaker, photographer to just get on a flight and come to India and film our wildlife and go back as an expert. Not I'm not against them, but that has what has been happening all this while. So they are they are exploring a new model of working with presence, a person who's local in this kind of landscape. I know India and I know Central Asia. I'm more local here than the next Russian, right?
Who comes
So,
here? Yeah.
so, so a big push is happening globally in naturalistic environment, journalism, storytelling that we should hire local people more and more. And that conversation was there for last 5 6 years, but COVID has just initiated it.
Amplified it.
It amplified it because people are like, we can't fly there, but we want the story, and this is a great photographer. All these years we didn't acknowledge that photographer just because we had our Timmy going there every now and then, right? So now they are reaching out to us. The negative thing is that a lot of naturalistic storytelling has been about showing what and how beautiful natural history is.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if this is negative. This is again a change. That is, now people are trying to show not just the beauty of wildlife, not just show in the BBC blue chip films of Planet Earth that all the beautiful wildlife exists somewhere. Not where I am, but somewhere far away,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is going to happen is people are going to talk more about human nature relationship, how we have exploited or how we have gotten exploited, and vice versa. So, I think it is going to impact the way we envision, tell, understand, and grasp naturalistic story entirely. Because people are going to be like, we are not in a era where we just show that everything is hunky dory, and we don't have to show that everything is doom and gloom, but we have to find a balance. I think that's what is going to happen with COVID in there.
Wow.
And
So there's like a
personally,
massive shift.
yeah, it's a massive shift, and COVID has amplified it. And I would be, I mean, I had a bunch of projects, and my project like this was it. Like this was my what do you say, gangs of Wasapur. I was gonna get started now. After this, I had a bunch of these projects lined up, which all kind of got shelved because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure it'll come back, and I'm doing more projects in India. I had a lot of backlog which I finished, and it worked out well for me. I got lucky again that the day I ended my field work, next day lockdown happened. So
Ouch.
I got kicked out of Himalaya, and I came to my parents' house because I live in Bangalore, but I chose to work from here. and I had so many hard drives full of stories to tell. So that's what I kept doing, and I'm still, trying to get over that. So
Putting that
so
out.
it hasn't affected my work directly a lot, uh, and I'm totally aware that people have had terrible times. So I'm aware of it, and I just got lucky, is what I'm saying.
Nice. It's been a fun conversation going
Whoa,
into the.
I
I
thought it's
had
always almost an hour now.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I mean, I was like, it's excellent because I had no idea what you were going to talk about. I was just like, okay, let's just go into this and curiosity can get the better of us, which it did. And I have so much more knowledge than I had one back. And I'm sure that there are people, and also there are a few people asking you about internships and stuff. So they're probably going to hit you in your DMs. If you take assistants, do you take interns? Do you, I don't know, whatever. So
Sure, sure.
figure that out. Everyone who's watching who wants to intern with him, please text him. If he's got some opportunities, he'll explore it or he'll give you some tips. I am very glad to have spoken to you. Thank you, Prasen, and wish you the very best. Is there anything you would like to say before
No,
we
man,
sign off?
I think this was amazing. Thanks for hitting me. I saw one or two of your lives, and I was like, this is interesting, and I'm glad you invited me. I usually don't do this. I'm mostly off the grid. Like
What do you say?
I'm very rare on social media. Like I've done two or three lives so far, and one of them
Wow.
was with National Geographic. Like their Instagram is like some 160 million followers around the world. So I usually don't do this, but I'm glad because I knew
Thank
that you
you.
are going to bring audiences that I probably don't get to speak to usually through my set of people. So thanks for
Thank
having me,
you.
bro.
Thank you so much, man. This has been
And
excellent.
we'll definitely stay in touch and we'll connect and do something again ever.
Absolutely. I'll see you when you're in Bombay. That'll be fun. You could show me
Hopefully.
something that I haven't seen in my own surroundings.
Sure. Sure.
See
Yeah.
you, and thank you
Take
all
care,
for
man.
tuning in. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot.